Okay, good morning everybody. My name's Philip, I'm Commercial Manager for Eurovia Contracting. And Glenn asked us here today to talk about the Midlands Highway Alliance and how they've been using the NEC form of contract. I think partly because he wanted a good news story about the NEC, and partly because he didn't think you guys would all believe him if you just told him, if he just told you all that we only had 3 Z clauses within the framework. The Midlands Highways Alliance, which often will probably end up referring to just as the MHA, is a highways framework, and I'll let John talk about that in a minute in more detail, but they have an aim which is to deliver highway improvements efficiently. And the way they set out to do that is to instill a culture of safety, innovation and collaboration. And they try and do that through the tools they've got available, which are the contract for the framework, and also the framework itself, the community, the meetings, the training, etc. that goes with that. And the theme of this presentation is about how they've used that contract and that framework, how they've been set up to get towards this change of culture, to get towards this use of this change of culture to be able to deliver these highways improvements efficiently. And it comes back really to the sort of essence of contract drafting, at least as it was taught to me. And I was taught when you're putting together a construction contract, you've got 2 main objectives, and I'm sure there are people who are paid a lot more per hour who would say there's many more reasons. But those are to describe the agreement between the parties as unambiguously as possible about what you're going to do, what they're going to do, and how you're going to deal with things that change and go wrong throughout the course of the project. But the second is to try and incentivize the behaviours that you want to see in that contract, in the other party to that contract, and in then your own people as the drafter and your organisation, because the clauses you put in will drive behaviours on site. As Glenn says, those Z clauses will have driven particular behaviours. The contractors will have tendered with a particular mechanism for dealing with those Z clauses. The client will have put them in place and be thinking of a mindset that goes with that clause. Anyway, rather than give you the whole presentation here without introducing my colleagues, John Hooper here is the framework manager for the NEC, the gentleman on the end, and he'll be getting up in a minute to talk to you about the framework and to give you more general information about it. My other colleague here is Dave Collis. He is a senior highways engineer from Leicestershire County Council. He was instrumental in the drafting of the contract for the framework and also acts as an NEC project manager for many of the highway schemes that Leicestershire deliver. So over to John.
Good morning, everyone. You'll realise I'm unaccustomed to public speaking, so I thought I'd start by asking you a question yourselves. I've just travelled down from the Peak District, and I guess that most of you have travelled a distance to get here today as well. I guess some of you will have driven using the strategic road network, for which we have to thank Highways England, and some may have come on the rail network, so a big thanks to Network Rail. But I'm guessing that all of you started your journey or finished your journey on the local road network to get here today, either by walking, cycling, driving, or indeed on a bus. It's your local councils which have the responsibility for this network. And you'll want to see improvements. You'll want to see improvements to the network, whether it be the number of potholes, the air quality, reduce congestion, increase capacity, or electric charging points. The list goes on. In 2007, a group of councils came together to improve these services and seek efficiency by working together. Initially, there were just 9 authorities with support from a government-funded agency called the Regional Improvements and Efficiency Programme. We also received great assistance at the time from the Highways Agency and made use of their medium works framework in the very early days of the Alliance. The MHA, Midlands Highway Alliance, now has a membership of over 22 authorities, and we expect that to grow further. I'm not sure whether we all agree that the map there gives a definition of the Midlands, that they are current members. We get some faces pulled in Oxfordshire, I have to say. Thank them for joining the Midlands. As I've just explained, the MHA covers a wide range of services. Keeping the local highway network going requires regular maintenance, rather more regular maintenance than we can afford. There are loads of professional services involved, and from time to time we have the opportunity to carry out highway improvements. In all of this, the MHA chose to use the NEC family of contracts and has been using it for the whole period of the MHA. The reason for this is the family of contracts provides the flexibility to cover the whole range of services. We've used to date the professional services contract, the term service contract, the framework contract, as well as the engineering construction short contract and the engineering construction contract. All introduce effective project management into the services we provide. And more importantly, they fully support our collaborative ethos at the heart of what we do. And it really is at the heart of what we do. And that's why I've lingered on our logo there, driving collaboration. I was glad to hear that today's theme was collaboration and not the contract. I'm not a lawyer, and I only have a passing familiarity with the contract, but I am an enthusiast when it comes to collaboration. The collaboration started out between the different councils working together, but quickly has extended to the councils or the MHA working with the industry and other industry bodies. And the collaboration has been extensive over the last 12 years with bodies like Civil Engineering Contractors Association, the HTMA, CITB, the list goes on. Collaboration really is at the heart of what the MHA is about. Today, specifically, we're speaking about the success of the Medium Schemes Framework. Medium Schemes 3, MSF3, is a two-stage open book framework. And last July, we launched MSF3 as one of the first frameworks to adopt NEC 4. Like previous frameworks, MSF1 and MSF2, it's again based entirely on using the engineering and construction contract, option C, target contract. And this time, with MSF3, we have the opportunity to encourage the use of the X22 secondary option for early contractor involvement on all of our projects. We have a history of effective early contractor involvement, but it's only with X22 we have the opportunity to fully incorporate that within the contract. Our aim remains to deliver highway improvements efficiently. We have a shared culture and common objectives, as you can see on the slide. The MSF3 fully supports the government's construction strategy and its long-term vision, which is Construction 2025. The government construction strategy, as you'll be aware, has proposed a more integrated approach to the management of the supply chain and trialled new models of procurement, looking for longer-term arrangements, non-adversarial relationships, fewer suppliers, common incentives, integrated teams, and an objective assessment of performance. This strategy has been fully supported by the Local Government Association and the National Association of Construction Frameworks. The MHA, together with other regional frameworks, some of which I hope you'll have heard of, things like Your Build in Yorkshire and Construction Northwest Hub, the Southern Construction Framework out of Hampshire, and of course SCAPE and others, are all working together to develop guidelines for effective construction frameworks. And I recommend particularly the report there. We have to recognise that not all frameworks meet these requirements. There are framework risks. There are frameworks that deliver little or no work. there are public sector clients not familiar with or committed to the collaborative partnering process. And there are less expert clients believing that the lowest cost tendering will always deliver best value. The MHA now has a 10-year track record of over 100 projects that demonstrates the success of truly effective frameworks. MHA members have aggregated demand to create volume and generate efficiencies and provide sufficient work opportunities to cover supplier investment. We've seen constant growth from our first framework, MSF1, to MSF2 to MSF3. The numbers being over £200 million of work delivered in MSF1, nearly £300 million in MSF2, and in MSF4, we're currently talking about £400 million, which we expect to grow. MSF3 maintains a competitive tension in terms of value, quality, and performance between our four contractors. MSF3, our four contractors were Balfour Beatty, Eurovia, Galliford Try, and Morgan Sindall. And one of the things I'd like to celebrate today is the fact that Balfour Beatty and Eurovia have been on all three frameworks, continuing providing the long-term relationships that help to drive collaboration. We can demonstrate greater value for money for the taxpayer, and the savings that we're currently recording are in the range 10 to 20% of project costs. We pay fairly for the work done and the risk taken. To date, we've had 0 disputes go to adjudication. We ensure the supply chains are engaged from the early stages of the project. Currently in MSF3, we typically have 12 months of engagement or more. We have effective governance processes with active stakeholder management and client leadership. That is a definition for us of what we call our Framework Community Board. The Framework Community Board meets on a regular basis, provides extensive training, all delivered around the use of the NEC contract. And the group was last year recognised by the NEC user group as one of the clients of the year. Today with me, Dave Collis and Phil Reid are going to give you more detail of one of the collaborative relationships that's been developed over this 10-year period. And if I could ask Dave, as Leicestershire County Council's representative, to explain a little more.
Morning all. Thanks to John. John's obviously given us a brief overarching view of the contract. I'd now like to give you a more detailed view, I guess, of one of the local authorities that uses that contract. So, I mean, the sort of works we put through the contract, yes, they're fairly usual stuff, highway projects, structures projects, and these photographs just give you a brief idea of the sort of works we put through. And these have all been carried out with Eurovia, because as John touched on, they've been on the framework throughout the life of that, and I think that's some 8-9 years now. So what I'd like to say is they've all been fairly straightforward contracts, but as you can appreciate, they take a lot of planning, and that's where the collaboration and the ECI side of things come in. So if I just move on to this slide here, we've used the framework now for some, I think, 9 years through all its iterations. That's MSF 1, 2 and 3. I think Leicestershire's probably been one of the main users of the framework. I think we've probably put the most, sort of the largest number of contracts through the framework. And it's always tried to encourage collaboration, and I think that's because it's always had that option of ECI. I think under the first two frameworks, we didn't have X22 in there, but we still had that option of using ECI, and we used it all the time. And I think that was valuable. It obviously enables all the parties to get together, so the contractor, local authority, get to sit down at an early stage and build those relationships and trust that we're after as part of collaboration. You can sit down and talk about programme, utilities, all those sort of things way before you get on site, and that kind of then sets the scene. before you go into the main contract, and it's all that about that collaboration. And then because we've managed to use Eurovia on quite a large number of schemes throughout the framework, this enabled us to go into a relationship management plan under ISO 44001. And again, then that has spread that sort of collaboration throughout both parties that we can build on. I guess the bottom line is a contract alone isn't going to deliver you a successful project. It's about the people that are involved in that contract. So it's their attitude, their knowledge, their experience and their philosophy. So having that relationship management plan in place just sort of push that philosophy, I guess, across both parties going forward. This is, in effect, the framework as it is. It is an option C contract. It always has been throughout the whole period of the framework, so all throughout the 9 years. It's always been an option C contract only. I guess we believe that that's the best option for the type of works that the local authorities put through, and probably the best option for fostering collaboration. When we were preparing the contract documents for MSF3, we did consider putting option A in for a period. I guess that came as a request from a couple of the local authorities involved that thought it would give them better cost certainty. So we sort of had various discussions throughout the whole framework community, so that was all the local authorities and the contractors. And after much discussion, I think we decided that really option A didn't give you that cost certainty that they thought it would, and so we stuck with the option C. Out of those secondary clauses, X22, early contractor involvement, this was something new to our framework, as it were, to MSF3. As I mentioned previously, we'd had early contractor involvement available to us under the other two iterations of the framework, but it was only covered in effect in the contractor's fee. So it was beneficial, and I think we got a lot of benefit out of being able to sit down and talk to the contractors before we hit site. But we thought we could do better, we could get more out of it. And so, yes, we adopted NEC 4, and we also put in X22. So I think, it does definitely foster that sort of collaborative approach to things. Obviously, Glenn's touched on Z clauses this morning. We've made every effort throughout the life of the framework to reduce the number of Z clauses. And in fact, when we went from MSF2 to MSF3, we went from 12 Z clauses down to just 3. Now, I believe that the NEC 4 contract should be used as it's written, without any sort of amendments or additions as much as possible, and that's why we've tried to keep it to just those 3. I know Leicestershire, from a personal point of view, we don't look to add Z clauses to the works packages that we draw off from the framework. I think again this fosters that approach of collaboration, that the contractor's not feeling that we're trying to, if you like, push risk towards them unfairly, so they can feel that we can just operate as one big team. Again, this is our share percentage range within the framework. So this is what all the contractors sign up to, all the local authorities. The framework doesn't use any other secondary options to incentivise or provide bonuses. However, we feel that this share range is very fair, and again, it's been the same throughout the life of the framework, throughout the 8 to 9 years. And I feel that this provides a necessary sort of incentive to work efficiently and encourage collaboration. I think from talking to the contractors, it's quite a generous share range compared to other contracts they work on. John touched on the framework community. We do meet regularly, we meet quarterly, and that's all the local authorities, all the contractors involved. So every few months we all sit down together, discuss current and the ongoing schemes that are on site at the time or in the stage of ECI. And I guess any problems can be raised, discussed as a whole group. And again, any training or working groups, they always involve everybody. So there's always members of both client and contractors, or the local authorities and contractors on those groups. And so again, it's just that whole issue of collaboration just goes on and on and on. I think it goes just across the board. Just going back, I suppose, to the X22 clause in the ECI, I guess it has been a bit of a learning curve for us, not only as local authorities but also contractors. I guess I felt going into the framework that maybe the contractors would be, I don't know, a bit more knowledge of it, shall we say, but I'm starting to believe that we're both on a big learning curve. I suppose the jury's still out on value for money on X22 at the moment. As Leicestershire, we've got 2 schemes currently at stage 1, about to go into stage 2 and get onto site. So I guess what we'll have to do is sort of look at all the savings that we've captured and just see whether we are getting value for money. I think we probably are, but as I say, it is a bit of a steep learning curve, so we'll see. But that's all from me, and I'll just pass on to Phil to give you a view from the contractor.
Okay, so obviously you've heard there a bit about the framework, you've heard about the client's view of the framework, and I'll just then talk about it from the contractor's experience, or at least Eurovia's experience. Obviously there have been quite a few contractors through the framework over the time. There are 2 things I'd pick up as being the most important, or as having the most influence on behaviours. Talk about this incentivising behaviours to get to this collaboration. And they are the contract in itself, as perhaps unsurprisingly, and the pre-contract. There is all the framework stuff as well, and that you can't undervalue that joint training, those regular meetings, that face-to-face conversation on a monthly and quarterly basis within the framework. But for the purpose of this, I'm going to dwell on these 2. There isn't really much to say about the contract, though, because, I mean, if you were doing a commercial review on that as a risk when you were going to a tender, there'd be very little to write, because there isn't anything in there. What there really is there's a lack of things that change the risk profile or mean you have to consider anything. But what that practically means as a contractor is that my staff spend a lot less time managing MHA contracts in terms of administrating them than they do any of the others. And that means that our guys can focus on actually delivering the scheme and actually focus on delivering the works. Again, that collaboration, you've taken out any of the potential barriers for disagreements about ambiguities or how you interpret a clause. And it means we're exposed to less risk because that risk profile hasn't been shifted. And it means that basically our people know that when something does change, the rule book is there behind them, everyone understands that rule book, and we just go back to it and we move forward. So we can focus on, as I said, building it, which drives that efficiency which the MHA is trying to drive. But actually I think the pre-contract, and I won't just focus on the procurement routes within the framework, but actually the pre-contract as a whole needs to be taken and considered as one, has really led more to that incentivising those collaborative behaviours. Now, we don't need to be incentivised to do a good job, obviously, as a contractor, but it doesn't half help. If you align those incentives for being able to manage risk and make a small profit with delivering the job efficiently. There are 3 procurement routes through the MHA. There is a sub-regional call-off where each of the clients has been allocated a contractor who, through the competitive tendering process, was shown to be give the most economically advantageous offering for that county. And they can go to that contractor and work with them over the period of 4 years and just give them the schemes that they want that contractor to deliver. And that means that as long as a contractor, if I do a good job and keep that client happy, I'm going to get more work. So straight away there, you've got that massive incentivization to just carry on working. And I think that is one of the biggest things in MSF3 that drives that collaborative behaviours, if people weren't coming in with a collaborative attitude. Additionally, if they want to maybe not put all their eggs in one basket, they have a direct call-off option, and they can then feed some information into the sausage machine, which will spit out which contractor they get. But that is based on the scores and previous performance of those contractors. So again, as a contractor, I'm being incentivised. If I do a good job repetitively, I've got a better chance of winning more work through the framework. And then you have a mini competition option as well. But even that is largely weighted towards quality. And again, doing that good job, building those relationships, has a big impact on whether you pick up those schemes or not. And all of that leads to having a more sustainable pipeline of works. You know, I'm able to sit down with the authorities within the MHA and discuss with them their pipeline of works over the next 4 years, which allows us to invest in people, invest in training, equipment, innovations, try new things, which allows us to, do that innovation, collaboration, and safety, which again, the MHA game, delivering things efficiently. Within that as well, you've got the ECI, which plays a big part. Now, I'm not going to dwell on the ECI. ECI will be a presentation all on its own. I think we're all familiar with the benefits you get out of that. And when you combine that then with the negotiated target price, and regardless of the procurement route you've taken, at the end you're going to end up sitting down and jointly trying to agree what the forecast cost will be of delivering that scheme, and then you'll put the agreed fee on the end of that. But that means we can have a really sensible conversation about risk and how we're going to do it, and optioneering. So it means that when we get to site, we are, as a contractor, really unlikely to find that the estimated price for one bridge, but actually we're building two. And as the client, it means that you're not likely to get to site and find that you've gone out to tender and the tender prices that came in were all above your budget, but you've got to try and deliver it anyway at this point. So you've created a system where you've removed the financial pressures that drive a lot of the negative behaviours in the industry. You've not got a client who's trying desperately to bring the cost of the scheme down because it's over their budget, because 12, 18 months ago when they engaged the contractor in ECI, they asked for a budget cost for the work at that point. And as a contractor, you have been able to sensibly apportion risk. You've been able to sensibly work out the forecast cost of the work over a period of 12, 6, 18 months. And you know that as long as things go sensibly, you'll be fine. So you've taken out those negative behaviours, which means, again, less time administering the contract. And you get into a bit of a virtuous circle where all of these things help to build that relationship, that 10.2, that collaboration, which then, again, leads to more better outcomes as you go through. There is one cautionary note to note, and something we have seen in the framework, and I've seen it in other contracts as well, in that you can have the best collaborative contract that's incentivised between the contractor and the client or employer to work together. But if a third party is brought into that mix by either of those parties to have a key part within the project, a supply chain partner, a third-party project manager, designer, whatever, but they've been given different incentives to deliver that work. Perhaps they've been brought in as a project manager and they're going to be measured on how cheaply they managed to deliver the final end game, or they've been brought in as a contractor's or contractor's designer or contractor's site manager with a target to maximise revenue or what have you. You're not going to get the same benefits, and it destroys that. So it's really come back to the people. You can have all these incentives, but if you haven't got the right people incentivised in the right way, it all rather falls apart. Now, Dave and John both mentioned about the relationship between Leicestershire and Eurovia. And this is a snapshot of the schemes that Eurovia have delivered through the MHA framework over this 5-year period, 2013 to 18. And these are the ones that were delivered for Leicestershire over that period by Eurovia. You can see there we had a decent run of schemes together where we were able to do quite a lot of ECI, and we were able to work and deliver those schemes successfully. And the outcome of that was, as Dave says, the ISO 44001, which is really a good, it's someone externally coming in and saying, yeah, you guys do actually understand collaboration. You are working collaboratively together. And it's interesting that a lot of the collaborative relationships under ISO 44001 that exist are only work when you're in contract working together. So they're quite common, or more common, in a sort of a term maintenance type role or long-term contract. But there have been times when that has been in place, and the collaborative relationship has been in place, where we have not been working for Leicestershire, but we have still maintained that collaborative relationship. We've still met every other month and exchanged information about safety and innovations. We've still managed to get value from that collaborative relationship, and I think that has been something that has been, if anything else, a proof of the collaborative relationships that the MHA has managed to build. So it falls to me to summarise this quickly. I think we're okay for time, actually, so there'll be time for some questions. So, again, MHA wants to deliver schemes efficiently and effectively. They've got two tools to do that, if you see them as building a framework. They've got the contract and they've got the framework. But what they've got to create is they've got to create a culture through how they've drafted those documents. And you can see how Dave's taken the NEC and not adjusted it. How we've had those trainings and meetings that have led that culture. And again, that long-term relationship, which has driven those key behaviours. And both of those have really allowed them to have this collaboration, innovation and safety. through a practical incentivisation, some financial incentivisation, not, a crass and obvious financial incentivization. It's not bugging extra money at people for being able to bring in innovations. They're more subtle than that. But none of it would work without having those cultures enabled. You can have all the incentives in the world, but if people don't come to it with the right collaborative attitude, it all falls apart. And that's something that we said in every presentation about collaboration ever given. But there have been some side benefits to that, which, genuinely, a lot of the things that are in that contract have reduced costs. We've got reduced tendering costs, as you get within a lot of frameworks, but not all. A lot of frameworks still have a big part of competitive tendering. It's more like a select list than anything else. We're able to pass those on to our clients. Less QS staff on our contract we will deliver a £10 million contract over a year with one QS. We have less disputes. As John said, he mentioned there have been no disputes in the 9 years that have been referred to a third-party dispute resolution service. And that's for delivering £500 million worth of work, John, roughly?
That's so far.
And I think that's quite an achievement that should be really celebrated. Now, I'm not saying we've all agreed every time. That would be wrong. We have disagreed about things. But the point is we've worked through them mutually to come to an agreement we can move forward. And there's always this threat that before we go to dispute resolution, the dispute resolution process under the MHA is that any dispute before it goes to third party must go to the Framework Community Board. So any dispute must be aired in front of all the other contractors and all the other clients. So perhaps that would give you an idea as to why there have been less disputes gone to third parties. And you've also got the employment and skills benefit, and you could put social value or anything else against that as well. That long-term pipeline of works allows those contractors to invest in people and innovation and tools, and also to do charitable works and things that you would get. And that is more common to a lot of other frameworks. But again, I really do think that it does lead to delivering highway schemes efficiently. And I hope you've found this interesting, and I hope you've seen a window onto how you can do this with the contract. Any questions?
So, any questions for anyone from the panel? Your desk mic's on.
Hi, Richard Patterson from Mott MacDonald. One of the things I keep trying to get out of people in the industry is how to do ECI. We're all talking ECI, we've got ideas, but I'd be interested to know what level of financial information is fixed at the start of your ECI develop the cost of the project phase. Is it just a fee percentage, or was there any more fixed at the framework level? Sorry to get into detail.
I wasn't sure if that mic seems to be on, but I'm not sure this one is, but I'm sure you can hear me. Yes, as we've said, we're now using X22, so when we enter into stage one, we provide the contract with a scope of what we expect what the goals we want to get out of ECI. The contractor provides us with an estimate for that element of works, and so we do, and they also give us an estimate of our actual works cost as well. So we get two figures. We get an estimate of what it's going to cost for the ECI, and also an estimate for our works cost. So yes, we do have an idea of what it's going to cost. But
just before you even start,
yes,
in terms of agreeing that cost is reasonable, is it just the fee percentage that you've got, or have you got prices for anything?
No. But prices for anything. There's a fixed fee that the contractor has as part of the framework, and that goes across the board, whether it be for ECI or the works, and that's the same for all the local authorities. So each contractor has a fee, and that doesn't matter whether they're working for Leicestershire or whether they work for Oxfordshire or whoever.
Bottom up, this is the price based on.
Yes. So they provide us with information that says you've asked for X, Y, and Z in your scope. This is how we've priced it up. We say then yes, we're accepting with that, and then obviously things may change as Phil says. It could be 6, it could be 12 months of ECI. We do add things. I know the scheme currently working on at the moment in stage 1. We have actually done enabling works on site as well using it. So the cost of that ECI has gone up, but that's been in agreement.
And the specifics of ECI we're going to go into in the session just before lunch.
I think just to add a little bit more detail there on the X22 option, there's a requirement to provide pricing information. So on the initial procurement for the framework, we priced a number of model projects, and that we see as the pricing information. So it's a cost.
You're required to use those or as a baseline in some way.
As a baseline, exactly right. I don't need to explain the difference between a cost-based contract and a price-based contract here. It's very much a cost-based contract, but you do need a baseline. And so the most economically advantageous tenders provided for the original model project are used as a baseline to build, to negotiate a target price for each future project scheme.
Thanks. Dean?
When you're building up the price at the end of stage one, how have you dealt with the pricing of risk?
I mean, we would develop a risk register throughout the ECI process that we jointly agree, and we put figures against that. And quite often when, Dave talks about giving you that first price, what we do is we would do, so this is the most likely, and this is the price risk register, and it could go up to this or down to this because there'll be opportunities in that risk register. And then basically we'll deal with some of those things. Some of those things will fall away and be mitigated. Some will be built into the defined cost, those mitigations. And then you get to the end of stage one, and whatever's left, whatever's assigned to the contractor, goes on top of the defined cost at the end of stage one.
Have you had instances where you've had a difference of opinion on how much that risk should be, and how have you resolved those?
Talking.
Yeah, in essence, yeah. I mean, as I say, as Phil says, there's a long list of risk and opportunities on a register, and of course, when we get to the end of stage one and want to proceed to stage two, as the, if you like, the local authority, we've got the budget. So of course, we've got the target price that the contractors put forward. We've got our element of risk. We've got a risk pot from that risk register, and then of course all the other things that cost us money as part of our budget, whether it be land or design fees and everything else. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's just a matter of talking about it. We meet regularly and update that risk register, and it's just carried forward through from one stage to the next.
And there have been, it's true to say, within those 9 years, there have been stages where the contractor and clients have not been able to agree that allocation of risk and cost. And what they've done is they've mutually agreed to walk away from it, and another contractor has been brought in to deliver that work. I don't think it's happened very often. I think
About 1 in 10 projects, I think, fail to reach agreement at stage one. We're talking as though stage one and stage two have been used throughout the 10-year history. It hasn't. The equivalent to stage one was always done at the contractor's risk, and any monies that he eventually recovered for that would be through the fee, because they were not, the costs in ECI during our first two frameworks were not part of the schedule of cost components, so it was very much at risk. But throughout that period, the incentive has been to deliver schemes through the framework, and the incentive on the contractors is to achieve turnover and secure that fee. And so agreement has been reached on 9 out of 10 projects during that phase on the level of risk. And that level of risk will be different for every one of the projects, and definitely for every one of the 22 authorities involved.
Time for one more question. Who's gone? Rob, over the other side. Come on, Chris, hurry up.
Should have organised this.
So my question is slightly higher level, and it's MHA and your providers are quite sophisticated users of NEC now. What would your key learning be that you'd push back to someone at the beginning of the journey who isn't a sophisticated buyer under NEC and hasn't necessarily got a very sophisticated supply chain? How do they get from that starting position to where you are now?
Go on, John.
Yeah. We don't feel very sophisticated. But we may be more sophisticated than we were 10 years ago. And I think we've all got to where we are, and I'm sure everyone in the room would agree, everyone gets to where they are as a result of their experiences. And the experiences across local authorities go back a long way. I myself have been local government engineer for 40 years. I first used the NEC in 1997. So you really have to start with the client's level of understanding, and you have to build on that. And I think it's that trust word again. You've got to get a trust developed within the relationships that you're trying to achieve. And I think the big assistance that the MHA has been able to provide is that we've been able to bring people together, whether it be one client with another client or a client with a contractor, and mediate and develop that trust based on a sound track record of evidence. And when people join the MHA, they have to sign an agreement, and biggest issue in that agreement is they have to be prepared to share information within the framework community. We find that really difficult to do, all of us, but we are getting better at it, and the amount of information that is shared builds the amount of trust that exists. So it's a long, slow process, but a large part of my role these days is going to less sophisticated local government client organisations nationally. In the last few weeks I've been approached by a number of counties. I have in the past been down to see TfL and help them to understand that you can only build that trust by taking small steps with the industry over time.
But if you were going to take some practical, I think it really needs that open book. I think that's really important, that open book cost model. Having ECI, I think, is key to delivering successful projects. And also having that, again, that risk, that open conversation about risk. You know, I've been in conversations where we've said, right, so we've got a possession with Network Rail on this scheme. Do you want the contractor to price this risk, or would you like the client to take it? Now, obviously, you then have that conversation, and you can, based on your budget or your risk of likelihood, you can sensibly do it. And the other thing is joint training. So for each of the schemes, we've always at the beginning had someone like Glenn, or actually mostly Glenn to be fair, come and deliver
Say like that.
a joint training session to the client's team, the contractor's team, and occasionally some key supply chain partners as well. And that builds that trust, that you're all working off the same understanding of the contract at the beginning, not 6 months in, we seem to be disagreeing, should we have some NEC training? It's before we've actually raised the first notification.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to bring the first session to a close. Anyone who didn't grab a brochure when you arrived this morning, do grab one. It's got the running order, it's got the sponsors, the speakers, all the details in there. A few of you, the badges, there was a couple of badges left behind. Hopefully they're there now. So go and check in and see if you can grab one. And then when we come back, the handout, the A3 handout on your chair, Matthew Garrett's going to be talking about sort of legal cases. Be quite useful if you just had a glance at it before that session. But we're going to be back at 10 past. If we need it, we do have the bell to round you up.